Welcome to the THA podcast for free thought and open minds. Hello and welcome back. I'm Paul Obitelli and this is edition 6 of the THA podcast, brought to you by Humanist Arts. Our goal is to bring you weekly shows where we'll get stuck into various discussions and all the best interviews we can get our hands on. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, history, theatre, art, fashions, music and much more. If you have any feedback you'd like to send our way, ideas for the show, requests for potential guests, or something you yourself would like to share with us, you can do so by emailing info@thapodcast.com. That's info@thapodcast.com. Joining me here today, the one and only David Parry.
Good evening, Paul, and watch the skies. Strange powers and portents are surrounding us all.
I hear that as well, mate. I hear that as well. Yeah, we've got an interesting guest on today. It's the Reverend Jim Williamson from Detroit, USA. Jim is an Evangelical Minister. He's the best-selling author of a book called Beyond Science Fiction, and is also a regular TV personality in the US. In his early life, he claims he was a victim of alien abductions, but has a slightly differing view of what that whole thing is about. So let's get to it. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
How are things your end of the pond?
Too cold. I'm ready for summer. We've had way too much snow and way too much winter. I feel like I'm in Iceland instead of Michigan.
Kind of in a similar situation. We've just had loads and loads and loads of rain down here. The sun's starting to raise his head now, so we're quite comfortable with that.
Not before I've grown webbed feet. I can't take any more. I'm moving to Madrid.
I feel your pain.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, we're delighted to have you on Jim, because you've got some fascinating things to talk about, and we want to get stuck into them as soon as possible. Basically, you've claimed that in your earlier years you were an abductee by aliens. Would you like to go more into that and let us know what went on back then?
All right. Well, to be honest, I never knew that what I had experienced as a child was really anything other than just childlike imaginations running wild. That's the ability they have to mask the experience so that you're not too much traumatized. And it varies between individuals. But I didn't even really know that what I experienced was real until I was about 45, when I started entering into a serious research in the whole UFO alien abduction, phenomena.
Okay, before you carry on, how old were you where you say you just only realised when you're about 45, you realised, but what was the actual age that you had the abduction experiences? Actually
from about 5 years old to about puberty, around 12, 13 years old.
Right, okay, just to clarify that point, right. Yeah.
And within the whole realm, I would be considered what they call a throwaway.
Yeah.
A throwaway meaning that, the whole process terminated within itself, apparently because I did not have exactly the genetic material they wanted, the mental rightness, or, whatever, some reason, and I'm rejoicing over it. I'm glad and happy that they didn't want me anymore. I would like to think it was because I was contentious and argumentative all the time with them, but I don't really think that was it. I think it was just simply that I lacked what they were wanting and was, tossed away, and I'm good with that.
So these experiences...
Can I interject? What do you think they want, Jim? What do you think they want?
Well, there's several things. The whole main theme of the alien abduction, according to a biblical lens that I would have, is that they are trying to develop a hybridization program to bring some of their comrades back from a disembodied state to a body state, but also redemption for themselves to go beyond their present condition. They're actually looking for an immortal body that this time won't be subject to destruction of physical death like what happened in the flood. They're limited and restricted because of, I believe, a punishment from God. They're what we would refer to as fallen angels. So I don't see them as necessarily aliens, but really when it comes down to total definitions, it's just a matter of word semantics. I mean, if they're alien in a sense that they are not indigent to this planet, they're intruders, but my take would be that they have no good plan for humankind. They have their own agenda, and they're going to accomplish it one way or another.
Is this are we talking about the Greys, that typical sort of big, large head with large eyes and small mouth?
Well,
is it those are the beings we're talking about here?
Well, within the Bible, it's described, various spiritual entities. And believe it or not, they all seem to line up with the most popular concepts of so-called aliens. We're talking about the Greys as being the Nakash, the word for serpent. We're talking about seraphim, which are seraph in Sanskrit means reptile, and of course the Nagas and all the other legends and myths about a reptilian type humanoid bipedal person corresponds with what the scriptures say, and then even some that are anacrid or insect type, which the leaders that look like mantises or whatever. So it's interesting that all of these types are mentioned, alluded to in the scriptures as being different types or orders of angels. So we're actually talking about all levels on all aspects as being part of either God's kingdom or part of a rebel alliance. So it would include all of them actually.
Okay. So I was going to excuse me. I was going to say, where are they from? But obviously that you've answered that already. That they're kind of scattered around from all over the place. Is that correct? Or
well, it's interesting that they claim to be from the Nordics. Proclaimed to be from the Pleiades. Originally, they said they were from Saturn or Jupiter and different things. And then I noticed that just as we sent out Voyager and Pioneer to take spectrographical analysis of planet conditions, within our solar system, then we found out, nobody can live there. Well, then all of a sudden the Nordics changed their address from Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury and whatnot to the Pleiades.
Yeah.
But and the Greys claim to be from Zeta Reticuli. Now, it's interesting that those two specific constellations are mentioned in the Bible with reference to demonic entities or angelic entities. So, there's a good parallel there.
Yeah. The experiences you had, were they? Can you remember them physically, or was it kind of like an astral dream kind of state? What was the nature of the experience that you had?
Totally masked as a dream. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was a kid, just before I went to bed, I would either hear a ringing or a buzzing in my ears, and then like a pulsation that literally my whole body was like pulsating, very much like what a lot of people talk about before they, experience an astral projection situation. So these are the feelings that I had, and then in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going to have one of these science fiction dreams again tonight. And then I was concerned or worried that I hoped that I didn't meet the shadow people. Now, the shadow people were entities that were in my room. I couldn't actually see them, but I could sense their presence. They would speak to my mind, and it would scare the tar out of me. So I just throw my blanket over me. I would huddle up scared, and then I would usually either pass out from fear or fall into a sleep state. Then I would have my my dreams. Now, my abductions never included the gray aliens and poking and prodding and putting things up my orifices or anything like that. I had dreams of the Nordics, and they would take me, and most of their experimentation was all mental. I remember one time they wanted me to turn this box inside out with my mind. And I remember being argumentative and very unhappy because I had an important test in school the next day. And I even saw some of my schoolmates there being, conducted with this testing too. And later to find out that these are the very things that it appears that most victims will either go through the medical examinations, sperm or eggs are taken, kind of a hybridization program going on, or they would be conducted into some kind of special training and conditioning for some future purpose.
Yeah. And when you say Nordics, is that the human type aliens or?
Yes, tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed,
right,
or red-haired, blue-eyed Caucasian men and women, and all looking in like perfect, very pretty or handsome people.
Okay, so you had all these experiences, and then you say by the time you're 45, your memory came back, which you hear that quite a bit with these kind of things where people suddenly they'll things will start happening in their lives. There'll be some people, they might even have a nervous breakdown, and then all of a sudden, boom, they remember it. It comes back out. What was your way of when you were 45? What was your position then? What was your outlook, and what were your experiences then to make it all of a sudden come back to you?
Well, I had a lifelong fascination with the space program. I mean, I'm 62. I followed the space program right from Sputnik on up.
Yeah.
So, I was always interested in that. And at the same time, we were seeing massive sightings of UFOs, and I was just fascinated by that. So this was a childhood project that carried over. I collected every newspaper article on them, read almost every book I could, and I was kind of a geeky type of kid. Even though I ended up becoming a biker, that's a story in itself. But, as a geeky type of kid, I was reading college textbooks on paleontology when I was 13, 14 years old, because it was just something I was interested in. I focused in it and absorbed as much as I could. Well, kind of the same thing with the UFO alien thing. So when I did become a Christian, I entered into my faith. I had a lot of questions because I knew some of this was real. And so I started questioning as early as 1978, around 73, 74. In 1978, when I was a pastor, I gave my first sermon on Genesis 6 and what happened there in the activity before the flood and how it would carry over to the whole UFO alien thing. So I kind of had 20 years ahead of time on most people on this whole thing. In 1996, I was called into this full time. And it was then that I started praying, Lord, do I know anybody that's been abducted? And I'm sure God was sitting there shaking his head going, kid, if you only knew, and I'm going to start showing you that all the things that I had happened to me as a child started to be explained as the more I investigated the commonality of things, involved in an abduction experience, the nosebleeds, the scoop marks, the lost time, the dreams. It's all suddenly, it identified my youth as a child. I'm going, oh my gosh, this stuff wasn't just kids, imagination of the boogeyman in the closet or under the bed. This stuff was really real because I had the scoop marks, I had the nosebleeds, I had the buzzing in my ear. These were all real. And so the more I prayed, the more I got flashes and memories of some of the experiences that I had. And it was through that process that I was able to turn that, plus being a pastor in an inner city with people that were, struggling with different addictions of sex, drugs, and just that kind of lifestyle. I was able to take and combine those methods and provide a way and means to help others get set free and delivered from the same process.
Right. Anything you want to add to that, David?
I mean, Jim is such an experienced and knowledgeable man. It's hard to know where to begin. Maybe we could move the discussion on to because you've already mentioned biking, and I know you're quite a pioneer in that community. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, I went from geek to biker, and that's crazy. It was just kind of a thing where being kind of a lonely kid looking for some place to fit in. And I had a good friend of mine worked with, and he bought a motorcycle. He let me ride it one time, and I was hook, line, and sinker. I got into it. Next thing you know, because of some class distinctive kind of things growing up as a teenager, I was already pretty much bitter and isolated in some ways. And the more I rode, the more I found groups of people that rode that enjoyed the same thing. And next thing I know, I'm in a motorcycle club in Detroit, packing a 45 with a big attitude. Just got in the wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That lasted for a short time, but when it involved personally seeing a murder and everything, I had wonderful parents that trained me up the right way. And I just realized when I saw that, I'm a kid playing a game. I'm trying to be cool and bad, but you know what? I'm not hardcore. I need to get out of this. And so I did. So that was my, my brief, I guess you might say, a flirtation with riding in a bike club. But I knew the people, I knew the hurts, I knew why they were the way they were. So when I became a Christian, it was very easy for me to want to share my new faith I had with them, to give them a hope that they didn't have to, stay bound up with hurt and with anger and being a rebel, that they could do something with their life.
Was that stage in your life? Was that before you were 45 and you'd had that memory recap of what happened when you were younger?
Oh yeah. I had my first initial experiences becoming a Christian, or being what we would be born again, when I was 23 years old. So, I was probably 26 when I started in ministry as a pastor, and it evolved from my own personal evangelism. We formed a small Bible study. Most of us had bikes, so the next thing you know, we just I had this dream. I really believe the Lord was directing me to start an evangelical Christian motorcycle club. So fortunately, the Lord gave me a way to meld an ecclesiastical structure with a bike club structure and form what ended up being one of the first evangelical Christian motorcycle clubs in the Detroit area. So it kind of went from there. I mean, it's the rest is history. Now it's a very popular type ministry that's reached all over the whole world.
So basically, since you were a Christian, you've had no contact with these beings at all.
No, I know how to handle or engage spiritual warfare, and actually, like I said, I was a throwaway. So the horrendous parts of being abducted ended probably, when I was around 12 or 13 years old. But even the attacks that I've had and some other supernatural things don't happen anymore. It's more invisible. It'll be through situations and events and things. But as far as them personally coming, into my room or anything like that, no, that doesn't happen anymore, because I think they know that, I know who I am in Christ. I know how to use spiritual warfare against them, so they don't bother me on that kind of a manifested type of way.
I noticed at one point in your, I think, quite remarkable YouTube presentations that you mentioned Ephesians 6 and putting on the full armor of God. And it seemed to me, as I was watching your presentation, it was something to do with your ministry in Roswell, where this became particularly effective. Could you unpack that for us, Jim?
Well, the thing is that living in Roswell, New Mexico, I mean, Roswell is like the Mecca for the whole world for anything UFO or alien. And that's really the place to be. Well, I went there basically out of obedience. I mean, I had a fairly decent life. My wife had a very high paying, good job, and career in Detroit. And so when we left, we literally burned all our bridges behind us. We cut everything, went to a small town in the middle of the desert that had absolutely nothing to offer in the way of a lifestyle or anything, but we just believed that that's where we were supposed to be for the time. Well, I was only there for 4 years, but in that 4 years, I pretty much met everybody and anybody at that time investigating the UFO alien scenario, pretty much global, because everybody comes flowing into that city once a year during in July during the annual celebration and festival when the alleged crash happened. It was through there also that people would swarm into Roswell looking for help, either abduction or some other paranormal kind of problems that they had, meeting all the different people, having my first radio program at that time. I got more and more exposure and opportunity to actually help some of these people. And from that, it built up into what my ministry is today. But it helped me to be connected with pretty much everybody in the secular research investigating community, many of the people that you've seen on documentaries and everything, and also all of the Christians that were leaving the pews and pulpits and actually investigating this seriously. I was able to be on the ground floor level when all of this first started to develop. And that was invaluable. That was priceless to be there at the right time and the right place.
What's your impression of Roswell, Jim? I mean, do you think it's got an aura? I mean, do you think it's authentic? Do you think it's a cover for much darker powers? What do you think?
Something really happened, David, in 1947. There was a crash. I have interviewed so many people, and that's the nice thing of spending 4 years there. I came from an outsider to become pretty much an insider. I won the confidence of some people. They went ahead, and many of these people, and some of the people that I spoke to are linked. One gal in particular, her father is a well-known archaeologist. She doesn't want to be associated with this stuff. His career is in jeopardy and a lot of other things, and they didn't want that stigma put on him. So she was able to share with me a story that she experienced when she was a young girl by her parents, who knew the people who owned the farm on Corona, where the second crash was, where they took the dead gray alien bodies off of the property. They saw it as a first-hand witness, and she heard her parents talking with the people that owned it, saying, now they all went to the same church, the church that I eventually went to too. So we had that common bond of our faith. So that's why I lend this is a pretty good level of credibility from her. She said, she remembered her parents talking to the owners, saying that they couldn't figure out what the Bible had to say about these little gray creatures, because, as far as we know, there's nothing mentioned in the Bible about it, but, we saw these little gray creatures being carried away, by the military. So little stories like that were paramount for me anyway to, being in Roswell and hearing the first-hand witness. I also witnessed a soldier who was he was a low level, a corporal, in the Army Air Force Base and stationed in Roswell. So he didn't have privy to actually knowing everything that he was doing, but he did know that at that time there were large crates coming into his position as his job was to catalog. It was kind of like in supply. So his job was to catalog and record and all the things that were being sent out in the planes to another location. So all these boxes and things were going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is the Air Force Base that if we have any captured enemy or unknown technology, this is where we send it to be scrutinized. And so he remembers and testified to me that all of these crates were going in July of 1947 to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Many teenagers, young kids, who were teenagers or young kids during the Roswell crash, because keep in mind, most of the people are in their 80s, so they're no longer with us, the actual eyewitnesses. So many of the kids that were there at that time, they remember a date and a time when a certain section of the desert was cordoned off. The military wouldn't let anybody go in or out or anywhere else. So this tells me that there was no weather balloon crash. This wasn't anything that could be explained in any normal means. This was something very out of the normal that happened there. And I think it's these little testimonies of people that really speak the loudest to me that, something extraordinary happened in 1947 in Roswell.
Paul, what do you want to, because I know your main thrust this evening is sort of to do with intelligences from elsewhere. I mean, what do you want to take it up with?
I'd say one thing I've noticed, when you speak to a lot of Christians, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, sometimes you can get a fanatical mindset, and you kind of think, you can't help but think that people are a little bit crazy. One thing I've noticed, I think Jim comes across as a very down-to-earth, level-headed, sane person, and as much as the information is so out there and so on. So firstly, I'll say I'm really intrigued because it just comes across very genuine and level-headed, even though sort of far out there and off the wall. What we'll say is it's quite a broad term, Christianity, nowadays, because there's so many different types of Christians out there. Do you ever feel you need to do anything ritually to protect yourself from these astral beings, or is it just your mindset, the faith you have in your mindset seems to somehow keep you safe?
Well, it's basically standing on the promises that I have. When God called me into this situation, He told me, here, weigh the balance. This is where it's going to take you. Are you willing to pay the price? And I go, hey, it beats slipping my in the bathtub and cracking my head and dying for nothing. So, I don't mind. I'm good with that, Lord. Okay. So basically, there's promises that say that, that if I'm obeying God and going on His path, no harm can come to me that hasn't already been approved or ordained by God. So if I'm in that kind of protective hands, I'm not going to be afraid. So I'm very outspoken. I don't care if the Men in Black or, the NSA are listening to me. I don't care. I've got a job to do, and I'm going to speak it out until the Lord tells me otherwise.
Well, yeah, that's the way to be. Do you feel these beings are working with any negative people on the planet, like like the governments? Do you feel that they're interacting with them, like people like David Icke will go on about that they're being, whether they're being possessed by them or working cahoots with them? Do you feel there's a bit of a team effort going on where various governments are actually in the know with these beings and doing what they're told?
Oh, absolutely. But it's a product of compartmentalization. The people that are on the highest level know they're working directly and probably eye to eye, face to face with these fallen angelic beings. They know who they're working for. They know who they're serving. But I truly believe, especially in my government, the American government, I think most of the people that are working in the military really think they're working back engineering and trying to recoup technology from entities outside of our Earth. I don't think any of them, well, I shouldn't say any. I think the majority of them are innocently thinking they're doing good when they're actually doing the deeds of the devil. They don't realize it.
Useful idiots, sort of.
Yes, well, it's the ingenious way, and actually we gleaned this from, we were so impressed at how the Nazis were able to keep secrets of they're working on circular disc aircraft, anti-gravity electromagnetic, MK Ultra, working with LSD, dividing, fractalizing the mind and compartmentalizing things to make the Manchurian candidates, working on cloning. and eradicating a section of population without anybody really knowing what was going on. We were so impressed with that, rather than be abhorred, we said, hey, why don't you come on over and help us restructure? They captured, or actually surrendered, SS General Reinhard Gehlen surrendered. He was the Eastern Division's top Nazi SS general officer in charge of intelligence. He surrendered and then came over, and they said, well, why don't you help change our OSS into something that emulates what you guys are doing? We're pretty impressed with the way you do things. So he changed the OSS into the CIA. So even many of our operatives in 1947, we had more operatives that were ex-Nazi and Gestapo members than our own operatives. So it was to our own undoing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these leaders, you can see there's a lot of occult symbology, which in previous shows, me and David have talked that sometimes it can be pigeonholed, and a lot of people can be attacked for no reason, really, because obviously not everyone's bad in that,
right,
in that aspect. But I mean, one thing that the rulers and governments of the world, they've often, through history, they've promoted Christianity going back from the Romans and so forth. Why, from that aspect, why would these people promote something that's going to keep you safe?
Jim, before you answer that, I need to add something. What is your personal reception, do you think, by the Christian community?
Those that are flexible. I mean, because I am true to the core issues of our faith.
Yeah,
I am absolutely solid and true. Even my own pastor says, I don't understand. You're so way outside of the box on a lot of things, yet you have a determined core to the faith that you don't depart from. And I said, well, it's because, I got called into this after experiencing miraculous things, being the pastor of the King's Kids in Detroit. I mean, I faced, life and death situations where I can say that God only supernaturally saved me from certain death. So for me, a lot of this is not theology or academic knowledge. This is my life. This is what I lived and what I've experienced and what I know to be true, that I can't, though I can't prove to others or myself, it gets me standing on a solid foundation for my faith. So I'm able to, think outside of the box and consider the unconsiderable, and then see how it references into my faith. And what I try to share with others, Christians, is the same. Now, I got to tell you, I've been asked to politely, leave, usually by ignoring you until you get discouraged enough to go away. I've been uninvited to many churches in my last 20 years, so I'm used to the format. So it's not always one that's easily accepted, and I haven't, made some great impact within the Christian church. However, small battles, small little things, winning 2 or 3 or 5 people at a time, it has accumulated over the effect. When I first got involved in this, I was one of the first 5 people, I think, that posted a biblical presentation of UFO and aliens connected to Genesis 6 in around 1998. At that time, there were probably only a handful of people that even understood what the heck we were talking about. Now you look on the internet, there's thousands of websites all over presenting a biblical perspective. There's chat rooms, there's discussion groups that include literally millions of people all over the world. So it means that myself and a few other handful of people back in the 70s, we did our homework and we did it good. And it's become a total knowledge boom of an awareness. But it's been a tough road. It's been a very tough road. I think when people are open-minded enough to study my research, I don't ask people, look, don't believe me because don't disbelieve me because it sounds weird, but don't believe me because it makes sense to you. Check my work. Go back to the, Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic. See it, that my scholarship is right. Pray about these things. And those that do end up becoming my best friends or followers. Those that don't, that just say, well, I don't, they become my nemesis. I mean, it's just the way it is. So I find that most people that take the time to study and read or re-examine, even in my book, I've probably got one of the best bibliographies. I'm realizing that I'm covering things like time travel, cloning, transhumanism, all these kind of crazy things. And I'm saying, look, the Bible mentions these things. It's not a mystery. It's there. Here it is, chapter, text, and verse. So I provide, if I gather sources from other books and other elements, I provide not only the book and the source, but right down to the page number and the quotation, so you can look up for yourself to see that I'm not pulling things out of thin air. The other thing, too, that I do, David, is that I consider all truth, no matter where it comes from. I may not agree with the premise or the conclusions, but if truth is truth, I'm going to accept it. One of the best scholars that wrote anything about a hollow earth that coincides with the Bible is an occult scholar who probably wouldn't want to stay in a room with me for longer than 5 minutes. But I admire his work. I don't agree with his premise or conclusions, but he's got some of the best work to prove the realities of a hollow earth.
Very interesting. I mean, certainly you and Chuck Missler were gigantic pioneers in this field. But it makes me wonder, I mean, maybe you get brickbats from both fields. I mean, I think you have sort of a troubled, quite undeservedly so, troubled or at least tempestuous relationship with many Christian groups. And, you know, that's life in some ways, and I think it's to their detriment. But maybe, I mean, what's your standing with the ufology groups? How do they treat you?
They wish they'd go away. Most of them don't like what we say. The only thing I can do is love them to death to see that it's nothing personal. I'm not against them. My gosh, if anything, I respect even, you know, most of the people that, you know, when we were going to have this convention and I was going to speak with these people, even though we may diametrically oppose each other in sense of occult and Christianity, I have a certain admiration for all of them because they're able to see something outside of the box that's real. And they may see it in a different lens, but at least they see it. Where I see most of the people in the world, they've taken the blue pill and they're in la la land and they haven't a clue of some of the nefarious things that are going on in this world. So there's a commonality that I have with all of them, that we see that there's something going on that most people don't see. That in itself is what presents the hardest problem. I find, though, that within so-called Christianity, we have the religious people that really don't understand having a relationship. I mean, I don't consider myself religious, and I don't like religion, but I have a relationship with my Creator. Now, so that negates, let's say, 2/3 of all people that call themselves Christians haven't come into that personal relationship. So they're clueless even about, you know, their own faith, really, and they have a religion but not a relationship. Now, with those that do consider a relationship, I even stand out apart from many of them because although many of them say they believe in the supernatural, the paranormal, and even, you know, the supernatural gifts that we're supposed to have as Christians, when you actually come to them and present to them, well, this isn't just theory with me. I've lived it. You want to see, look at here in my life. This is what I experienced. They look at you like you're the alien. So, you know, it's sad, but the Bible warns actually all throughout, you know, the church history and even before then, God has always had a faithful remnant that literally believes, accepts, and does. They don't just hear and learn about things. They go out, do, and apply. And I think that really, David, Paul, that's the difference of where I'm at with where many others are at. Now, those that actually go out and do and apply, they have no problem accepting and understanding what I'm saying. I find that most missionaries that have put their life on the line for preaching the gospel, they get it. They get it right away because they know themselves, they've experienced these same kind of miracles. That's the biggest problem that we're up against. Those that are purely just intellectual and academic, that have not actually experienced any of these things for themselves, they have a hard time with it. And it's because they've never experienced it. So I rejoice sometimes, you know, if somebody comes to me and they said, I've never seen any of this before, but I had this visitation last night and it's freaking me out. What is it? I'm saying, good. Now you're going to take the red pill. Now you're going to start seeing reality for what it really is.
So can we talk about your ministry? Sorry, Paul, and then we'll get back to the aliens, I promise.
All right.
Well, no, I mean, they fascinate me as well, but I mean, I think Jim's a one-off, and this is a huge opportunity to talk with him. You're evangelical by background. How would you see, and you're still a practicing minister, I believe.
Yes.
So, you know, how do you see the development of your ministry, you know, in terms of Christianity? I don't mean a deepening. I just take that as read with someone like you. Do you see it taking different forms in different parts of your life, or, you know, has it been a continuous thread all the way through?
Pretty much, I would say the core has always been a continuous thread, but it has definitely taken on different attributes. There were times when I first was understanding some of these things myself, I had to, I wouldn't settle for just sitting behind a computer monitor gathering up information. I wanted to go out and see firsthand, first person, talk with people and who had these experiences and gather things myself, first person. So I did that as much as I could. So there was a time when I was, doing reconnaissance, research and investigation. Then when I started tying in conclusions to what I believe the scriptures had, then it was time to start proclaiming these things. And then, working with others as they were progressing and understanding the same things and exchanging notes, sharpening iron. And now I've come to a place in my ministry where I won't make the vain claim that I know everything about this topic. I certainly don't. I think the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. But I've learned enough now that now I have to take it with authority and go into every nook and cranny, wherever I can, to proclaim these realities and then give people the only hope that they have, which I believe is in Christ and having a relationship with him. So my ministry has taken on maybe more of an evangelical thrust. Now, at the same time, part of that is also providing help for those that are victimized, by these situations. And in doing that, I've had to, I don't want to say tone down, but I've discovered some things that I know at least my fellow Christians are not ready to hear yet. And it would jeopardize my ability to help others. So I've just had to keep a lid on that until the right time. I've even shared some of this with my son and a few other younger people that should it go past beyond my own lifetime, they will be able to carry on. And sometimes these important truths will come out. But for right now, if I was to share too much, I'm afraid that it would jeopardize my ability to help others. And that's my main focus right now. I want to take all of this and be able to impact people's lives, to prepare them for the weird times coming ahead, and to help them, have an eternity too in the right place. So that's kind of my main focus now.
Well, I mean, the conference which you were due to be our keynote speaker at will certainly be revived either late this year or early next year, and I hope you'll do us the privilege of remaining our keynote speaker. I think you've got a formidable arsenal of knowledge to share with us, and it's going to be a great privilege to have you there.
Well, I'm certainly honored, and I want to, how can I put it? I'd love to see England. I mean, I'm half Danish, half English. So, to go back to some roots to homeland and everything, that would be fun. But I think more important, yes, I think when we have recent news, like when I heard this, I mean, I got a flood of emails from people all over the world. Jim, did you hear this? I said, well, yeah, I actually did a million times over. But when Iran had announced that through Snowden, they were under the awareness that the United States was in cahoots or working in cooperation with tall blonde aliens, tall blonde Caucasian aliens. I go, bingo, here it is. I knew it eventually it's going to be politicized. And I got to tell you that in some of my investigations, when I went to Stevensville, Texas in 2009, I was invited by a pastor friend of mine to speak at the church, and he told me he was in Fort Worth, Texas, and I was only a few miles away from Stevensville. In 2008, there was an unusual flap sightings of UFOs in 2008. And he told me, he says, Jim, you want to talk to some of these people firsthand? Went to high school with a lot of them. I can take you around if you'd like. I said, well, okay, yeah. I'd especially like to talk to the ones that saw a bell-shaped object. And so I did, and I talked to Officer Leroy Gayton, who's equivalent to a police chief in Erath County. And he told me that he not only saw them, but he filmed them and had clear photographs or a clear video of two bell-shaped objects encased in a round globing like an orb surrounding them like a force field. So I didn't record the conversation with him because at the time that I knew I was sitting on something that would get people killed really easy because nobody speaks about bell-shaped objects. Well, I had some of the early news clips from 2008 witnesses that said they saw the bell-shaped object. I got them all compiled on my computer, and it's in one of my videos. But now, recently, I knew that Leroy Gayton considered himself a Christian. I knew that he was a man of integrity, an honest man, a good man, family man. But now, all of a sudden, on all the recent ones, he denies that he has seen even a bell-shaped object, doesn't mention it at all. Neither do any of the others. They don't mention anything about a bell-shaped object. He said that he took the film, but it was nothing but two fuzzy dots and you couldn't tell anything. Now, this man's not a liar. I know he isn't. I think I'm pretty good at surmising, individual character. Yeah. This guy was told to shut up and he was scared. And so he obeyed. Somehow there's a big cover-up. MUFON was there, the UFO Hunters TV program was there. All of them are better investigators than I am, and I know that they were aware of the bell-shaped object, but nobody says anything. And you know why? A bell-shaped UFO was never seen anywhere except for Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965 when one crashed, and our military was almost expecting something like that. They had it tarped and carried off. Witnesses silenced, everything within an hour after it crashed. Now,
people are saying that's linked in with the Nazi experiments.
Well, yes, I was just going to say the only other time a bell-shaped anything was ever seen was at the collapse of the Third Reich in a complex in Prague, which was equivalent to Area 51 in America, where the Nazis were working on all the black ops things they were working on. And our main concern, focal point then, was to capture those that were working on the atomic bomb, their program, because we didn't know how progressive they were, and we were working on our own atomic bombs. So that was our main thrust of going in there. When we went in there, we found out that they were working on this thing called the Die Glocke, which was a Nazi bell, or they call it the bell. And it was actually a project on time travel, and these objects were actually time machines, reaching or bending, warping space and time, creating a wormhole and slipping through. Now, I had been saying for almost 10 years that that's what the Stevensville Lights was all about. An escaped Nazi, Dr. Hans Kammler, probably escaped Nazi Germany in 1945, and they were expecting him because one crashed in Pennsylvania and the other two were headed for Texas. They were all trying to escape because the Nazis had put an execution order on everybody working on that project. And Hans Kammler was the head of the whole thing, but he's also a hands-on engineer that was familiar with the technical aspects of this. He would have been the most #1 prize war booty at the end of the war. And it was known that he was going to escape to the Americans. They didn't want the Russians to catch him, not after what they did to a lot of the Russians. So, he was trying to escape. Now, I was laughed at and probably received like David Icke is received. And people just kind of took 2 steps back. Even some of my closest colleagues thought this was kind of weird. But now recently, a world-renowned researcher, Jim Mars, and I've met Jim. He was in my store when I was in Roswell. We had a wonderful 3-hour conversation. The moment he found out I was an ordained minister, you could cut the air with a knife. He looked at me as my enemy. Well, see, there's a politicized connection now that evangelical Christians are being accused of being part of the cover-up, and we're in cahoots with part of the more right-wing conservative elements of our government, which is it's total fabrication. There might be some group that is associated, but it's got nothing to do with my area of faith or belief. But it's being made to look like that. Well, anyways, the whole thing, Jim Mars got on Ancient Aliens program, which I'm sure they probably broadcasted in England as well as America, pretty popular. Well, Jim Mars stated what I had been saying for 10 some years. He said it was in his opinion after researching, and I consider Jim Mars, even though we don't agree with a lot of stuff, I consider him to be one of the most methodical, thorough researchers on this planet. And very good at documenting everything that he comes across. And he concluded that in his estimation that the Nazis got their technology from working with aliens, I would call fallen angels, and that he thought Hans Kammler had escaped Nazi Germany in 1945 and either went to another country or another time or maybe another planet. Thank you, Jim, because all the things that I had said in 10 years didn't really add up to much of anything. Now all of a sudden, even some of my colleagues and everyone else, because they saw it on TV from a reputable researcher, oh, maybe that Wilhelmsen isn't so crazy after all. Wow.
I think you're inspired, Jim. I don't think you're crazy. Let me ask you one last thing before Paul jumps on you for more UFO information.
Sure.
I remember reading Dennis Wheatley as a teenager, and most of his books are not to do with occultism, but I suppose the most famous ones are. And there was one volume in particular called They Use Dark Forces, as far as I recall, which talks about the horrendous level, the theoretically horrendous level of occult experimentation under the Nazis in Germany. Certainly Wheatley is absolutely convinced they'd made contact with powers, terribly dark powers beyond this world. What's your view on that, Jim? I mean, I've heard on the grapevine, friends of friends, that certainly very senior German people who were taken over to America after the war through Project Paperclip, etc., openly claimed that they were dealing with off-world entities, they were dealing with strange intelligences from beyond. But, do you think that Wheatley was correct, and it must be seen as a cult experimentation at the end of the day, and not simply experimentation?
Absolutely. I've got 68 rolls of film, and this was even a miracle how I even came across this, but I got 68 rolls of film, everything that the OSS had compiled over the years on the occult activities, the experimentations done in death camps, and the products that they produce, including the circular disc aircraft. I've got all of this on 68 rolls of microfilm from the United States National Archives and all the proceedings of the Nuremberg trials. I don't read German, but I have a friend who was born and raised in Germany, went to some of the finest private schools there in Germany. So she's helped me to interpret and read and help me to understand what I'm seeing. I've seen it firsthand. I know that some of these, the oxygen deprivation tests, the thermal tests on freezing, prisoners, this is stuff is even Mengele's horrible thing where he was sewing two people together to create and understand the idea of twinning. I don't think a normal human mind just even conceives this kind of stuff. It had to be demonic, but it wasn't until after the war. Many of the paperclip scientists, now I'm 62, so fortunately I had actually been able to talk to scientists that worked with paperclip scientists, and they're all pretty consistent. And these people were believed that they had come into contact with darker powers. They really didn't say aliens at the time, but there were non-human entities that assisted and helped them out in their knowledge and understanding. When they came over to America and could produce tangible technology that people could handle, see, and understand that was outside of the normal thinking box, they were so impressed that they considered their occult beliefs and ideas, and it literally changed us from within. And 60 years later, we have become what we once fought on a battlefield against. So I absolutely see this as a total reality. It's the only way to explain how they could advance their technologies so far ahead of anyone else on the earth. I mean, imagine they were working on time travel. They were working on cloning. They were working on Manchurian candidate mind control, and actually producing effective results.
Well, I'm going to be naughty and sneak in one last question before Paul.
One more? I don't know.
I know I'm hogging it. I apologise to you, my dear friend.
I'm glad you're feeling inspired, mate. You fire away.
Jim, it's this wealth of information in it.
He's an interesting chap, indeed. I'm enjoying listening, to be honest.
Well, I mean, Vril, Jim.
Yes.
The inner earth. I don't know what I think about all of that, but I do think there's something going on. And, after you've spoken to Paul, I want to talk to you about chemtrails, because, as you know, I tend to identify as a pagan, and I think the big idea in paganism is ecology, and therefore the poisoning of this earth is something that deeply distresses me. But Vril and all this nastiness that surrounds it, would you care to share your particular view of what it actually is, and why the Nazis were obsessed with it?
To be totally honest, it's interesting. The Vril Society, which was fashioned after a book by Sir Edward Bulwhite Little, who was an English scholar, member of the Golden Dawn, and a few other secret societies, Rosicrucians. I think he was also he might have been a Mason too, but he wrote a science fiction book, maybe one of the first science fiction books back in I want to say, I think 1848, but I'm not sure on that, but I think it was 1848. Anyways, he wrote one of the first science fiction books, which those that were in the secret societies or occults never took as a fictional book. They looked at it as truth veiled under a fictional story. But he wrote of a hollow earth, a man who accidentally fell through a cavern, in a mine, and encountered these large beings that wore strap-on apparatuses like wings and could fly because of their huge strength and abilities, that actually utilized a staff with a crystal where they could project their mental energy through that and convert any form of energy into any kind of thing and make flowers bloom, animals they could talk to, and just all kinds of supernatural power through this real power. And it was prophesied that eventually they would come to the surface and reclaim the world for their own. But until then, they lived in this subterranean realm and were far superior than anything that was on the surface. Now, this book was called The Coming Race. Believe it or not, the Nazis looked at this as being part of their identity and their heritage. The other book being The Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. It would almost be like the Masons and the Star Trek fan club merged together and produced the Tula Society, which was the foundation of the National Socialist Party, German Workers' Party. So, that's their crazy historical end. But the Vril Society, which has never actually been proven to be an actual society, in all fairness, but we have enough trails from them that seem to be that this entity did exist. The Vril Society was a very important society, and as early as the Pan-German movement of World War I, the Maria Osich and this other gal, Lundgren, these two were psychic mediums who claimed to have come in contact with members of their descendants, spiritual members of their descendants from the Aldebaran system, and gave them a blueprint to create a machine that would travel time and space. And so this is where the whole Vril saucer project came into being in around 1938, when they started to get some of the material that they could actually build this thing. Back when they first got the so-called blueprints, they didn't even have all the abilities to make this kind of a vehicle. This was one of the programs they were working on. The two other possible programs, one was the fact that it was alleged that in 1932, they had their own Roswell incident where something crashed in the Black Forest, and they were able to start tearing it down and back injuring it. And this was even before, of course, that Hitler came into power. He kind of adopted some of these things later on through his occult knowledge, kind of, put the pieces together. But we had different programs working on different anti-gravity projects. And that was probably part to their undoing, because all of them were competing with each other instead of working together, trying to get approval through the Reich. But we had another way that they were obtaining, and that was through Himmler and the SS Honor, which they were globetrotting all throughout the world, trying to get different artifacts and myths and legends, which they believed they could extract a literal physics. The symbol of Mercury is a good key to that. The symbol of Mercury is, the caduceus, which is, the medical staff. And you have this shaft. You have a pole with two shafts or one shaft on either end. Then you have the entwined serpents, and then with wings. Now, the way the Nazi mind looked at this, they said, if we take the element Mercury and put it in a vortex implosion, that it will create a new form of energy that we can utilize in flight. So they started working on Mercury, and of course now, from leaked out information from Area 51 and through Fauché and a few others, we learned that Mercury is a key element to faster than light travel, and that this is the key element to a UFO in actual mechanics and physics. There's many other researchers. One, William Lynn, who I had a chance, when I lived in New Mexico, he lives up in New Mexico too. I think one of the pioneers in understanding this technology, and actually found a part to a Nazi UFO. And he's got a lot of incredible information on that. But anyways, so it seems like the Nazis were able to develop their technology through direct psychic contact. So that would be a spiritual element, through actual physical obtaining things. So there's the physical realm, and then the mental realm of putting all the pieces together from all these mystery spots, which I believe are the remnants of the Tower of Babel. It's almost like the builders of Babel knew that they were going to be destroyed, so they had a contingency plan to encrypt a lot of their information into memorials spread out throughout the whole world that would retain and be kept for some time in the future when somebody would be able to put all these pieces back together. And so I think this is where it all happened, and it happened by the one group.
A remarkable vision, Jim. A remarkable vision. Paul.
Hello, I'm back.
Hey. Sorry, my friend.
No, it's okay.
It's your turn.
Well, I've certainly got a few. I mean, regarding Satanism, what's your view on that? I mean, do you believe that these Satanists, they're actually working with these beings you're talking about, or is it something separate? What are your views on that?
On the highest level, I think there is an element, the elite, New World Order, whatever you would want to call them, the ones that are pushing for a new social, new global order. Yeah, they are working directly with the fallen ones, and they know who they're working for, and they know that they're working for Satan. Now, to make him less nefarious or evil or whatever, they have a promise. And some of them, some of the most rich elite in this world, 10 of them actually, in Revelation 17, it says that there are 10 people who have received no power as kings as of yet, but will receive power as kings and will willingly give their power unto the beast, because they have one purpose and one mind. That's a global conspiracy by probably 10 of the richest people, families on this earth. And why? When we look at the UN's charter, they've carved out the world in 10 sections. So it's like, duh, okay, these people are throwing in. Why? Because they're going to be governor of 1/10 of the world. So I guess they would invest all their money. Now, why would this happen? What's Satan's plan, if he has a plan? In Isaiah 14th chapter, there's what we call the 5 I wills of Satan. And by going back to the Hebrew, you can look in the original words, and it actually is telling us who, when, where, why, and how Satan has a plan to eternalize not only this dimension, but to give back mankind an eternal body, circumventing God's way. So you go back to the Garden of Eden, we always know that there was 2 lies that supposedly started the whole fall, and that was, you shall surely not die, and your eyes will be open, you shall be as gods. Now, my claim is, guys, guess what? This isn't 2 lies. These are 2 promises that Satan is promising to fulfill for mankind, so that he's going to provide an alternative to God's ways of salvation, of eternal life. The 2 things that Adam and Eve lost, supposedly, in the Garden of Eden was an eternal body and an eternal environment. So the 2 things that Satan is going to plan on giving mankind in the end, ultimately, is a new body that's eternal, circumventing God's way and being accountable to God, and to give him an eternal environment. So we're thrown into a linear, existence right now, but he has a hope and a plan to eternalize this. Long story short, I got it covered in my book. It shows, how astrophysics, how we're lined up to this black hole, how everything might play into having this. There's a grid, like a fence surrounding the Earth, an electromagnetic grid, which is also the pathway of the angels, UFOs. All of this is tied into electromagnetism. So as we are beginning to develop more understanding of this, it's possible they could tweak this, and this is what I think holds us in a linear existence. And Satan is going to tweak this using HARP and other technologies to throw it out of sync and throw it into an eternal realm, but giving mankind also the promise that we can have an eternal body, and we don't have to be accountable to God for it. So that's enticing. That's a lot of people say, hey, great, man, I can, I have to be accountable, but I can still reap the benefits and the rewards of all this. What's interesting too, Dave, Paul, I want to throw this in quick, is that Theosophy is the essential philosophy that the Nazis, that was their religion. It's also the essential umbrella for everything and anything New Age. But when you take the theosophical symbol, it's the Egyptian Ankh with what looks like a Star of David, and then the Ouroboros, the serpent with a tail in its own mouth, and then encased in between the head and the tail of the serpent is a reverse swastika, and then there's pi up above. Sometimes it's not pi, it's the harmonic equivalent to pi. That tells you a whole story right there in that symbol. The Ankh usually shows up as a key to eternal life, and that's what it means. So various gods, if they're holding the Ankh, they have the key to eternal life. It's basically the key to eternal life. And then what looks like a Star of David is actually a Merkaba. It's what New Agers believe, and I think what science is beginning to understand is that right down to the molecule, each one of us has a sense of space-time around us. That's why they could send a plane in 2 different directions orbit around the Earth, and it would be 2 different time sequences there, because we're subject to the flow of electromagnetic and natural currents. So what that kind of shows, in a long story short, is that each plane was individualized by its own sense of space-time, and then it's responding to the gravitational rotations and everything going opposed or the same to it. That's why the reverse swastika is showing a certain flow of electromagnetism. So the whole idea is the key to eternal life for the individual or the planet is to eternalize it. That's where the Ouroboros comes in. That's where the Merkaba, the Ankh comes in. And then the key to that is the understanding the flow of this electromagnetism, which is dictated by the eternal 3.1416 pi. But here's the interesting thing. It has to be converted into terms of harmonics. In other words, the biggest mystery that people discern, and reason why they're trying to gather up dark matter to punch a hole into, they can create a wormhole, but they can't punch a hole to direct it into any particular place. It's because as God spoke things into existence, harmonics is what does it. So literally, the key there is in that symbol of the harmonic equivalent to pi, which is Om. In other words, if I was to sing out pi, it would be Om. So, long story short, you imagine dialing in height, length, width, and then time in reference to and then you'd have to have your own one for Earth. And I think the way the powers that be like to hide things in plain sight, we have a movie that tells us what that is. And that was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now imagine dialing that in harmonically with time sequences, 4 different dimensions. There's how you punch a hole in. You don't have to use fantastic amount of energy or black matter. You do it by harmonics. Harmonics. Yeah. So anyways, long story short, these are the elements that you can extract from myth and through the Bible. I found scriptures in 2 Samuel 22nd chapter that literally tells you, this is David proclaiming the praises of how God came down from heaven to help him out, vanquish his enemies. But encased in the original Hebrew in that story, in that song in Psalms, is a literal description of bending space, traveling through a wormhole, going through the slipstream in the center of it, and binding together 2 different dimensions, outside of time and into linear time. It's there, but you'd never know it until you looked at it from a 21st century perspective. That kind of explains some of the weirdness in my ministry. You know, how many Christians can handle this or take it? Not many. But those that are willing, those that are geeks that like to really go into and backtrack all of my words and how I understand the ancient Hebrew to say, they come back to me dumbfounded and go, wow, this is really real. I said, yeah, it is.
Fascinating. Well, so on to the Satan subject a little bit more.
Okay.
It's the alien beings, like these alien beings. Are you saying, are you looking at Satan as a literal person that's in control of he's a literal, and he's created these aliens? Or
well, see, the funny thing now, when the word Satan is used in the Bible, many times it's first person singular noun. They're talking about a separate individual entity, but a lot of times they're talking about the total embodiment of all things rebellious to God. So it'd be like a kingdom of, including every rebel that would be a part of that kingdom. So it's both, and basically how it's used in context is what determines whether it's talking about an individual, like in Ezekiel 28, it's talking about an individual. In Job 38, it's talking about collectively as a body of rebelliousness. So they have a plan. There's 2 different ways of looking at it. I would look at them as being hostile, trying to circumvent God. There was others that would look at it and say, well, they're liberators. They're trying to make us equal to God. God is not really who he says he is. So, they're the liberators. They're just trying to raise us up to a level where we can be independent and self-sufficient. And that's basically what Satan's problem was. He looked around and says, hey, I can do this. I don't need to serve him. I can break out in my own business. So that's really the choice we have is no different than what Adam and Eve had. We have 2 trees. We have 2 choice, 1 choice, 2 trees set before us. Do we want to do it on self-reliance, or do we want to depend on a God that says he's already provided all these things for us? So it's a matter of belief that way. But either way, it doesn't negate the fact that we have 2 powers that seem to be struggling for ultimate control. Satan wants his own, he doesn't want God's heaven. He wants his own eternal state separate from God. And he wants his own people, to be a part of it.
Okay, well, we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'll get another question in. What is solution-wise? Obviously, you're a Christian, and it saved you. Do you really see the only solution for others out there? They've just got to be Christians to save, or can you look at other faiths and find a way for people to find salvation through that faith? Or how strict are you on them? Because obviously, as I said earlier, there are many different sort of Christian perspectives. So
sure. Well, this is where I get beat up all the time. As a Christian, I have to believe the words that Jesus said. He said, I am the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Yeah. Now, in saying that, though, God is all-inclusive. Whosoever will may come. If you seek me with your whole heart, you'll find me. So I don't care what corner of the earth you come from, what lens you're looking for. If you're looking for ultimately the truth, whatever it might be, you're going to find it in Jesus Christ. And, he is your only hope. So also in saying that, though, it's an open invitation for everybody, and you have to make your own free will choice. So I think that lets me off the hook as not being some evil, non-inclusive person. I'm saying if I want to stay true to my faith, yeah, he's the only way. He's the only one that died on a cross and raised back from life again to bridge the gap. It's got nothing to do with our good works. It's got everything to do with putting our trust in the only person that provided a way for us back into the kind of like a parallel dimension. Actually, the Bible does teach that we do exist in a parallel dimension, and this life is going to come to an end. It's like it's like in the Matrix. It's not real. It's going to end, and the real one, it's going to be where we belong. But only one guy made the bridge to do that.
Well, I don't think anyone can argue that the Bible is a fascinating document, regardless of what faith they have. It's certainly an interesting bit of text that's lasted a long, long time. So, yeah. Well, that's I think that's what we've got time for. Anything else you'd like to add to that, David?
We definitely got to ask Jim if he'd be on the show again.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely, yeah. It'll be great. I mean,
we
could have gone on for another 3 hours, I think, with all this stuff. Yeah.
Well, people ask me, how come, you seem to know so much or how much or anything. It's like, gosh, remember, guys, I've been doing it since 1978. I better know a little bit, what I'm talking about. I mean, it gets so much that, I should know it, and I should know it in this capacity. So it's nothing, it's nothing great on my part. It's just something that's been a part of my life for so long that, that's just kind of where I'm at with it.
You had a very popular book out called Beyond Science Fiction. Have you got any other books out or any websites that you'd like to let our listeners know about?
Well, under my name, Jim Williamson, I have 109 videos. Some of the last videos are rather long and exhaustive. I was facing a near-death illness, and I didn't know. I was concerned that, some of this stuff might go to the grave with me, and I wanted to get it all out in some form. And since people watch movies more than they read books, I figured instead of writing a second book, I would go ahead and get everything else out that I had, at least on these videos. So there's 2 series that are rather long, but that's the reason it's long. If you cut it up, don't try to read it. It's not light viewing. Don't try to read it or watch it in a couple hours. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
this is on YouTube, is it?
Yeah, this is on YouTube. You can go there, and I've got 109 videos on pretty much all kinds of topics on that. A new book is going to be coming. If I'm able to, I want to do another one, a follow-up called Way Beyond Science Fiction, which has some of the more updated information and some of the latest trips I made.
Excellent. Well, that sounds well worth checking out.
Let me just say, I think Jim and I differ slightly in terms of religious ideology, but I consider him not only my brother, but a genuine inspiration to all of us. I mean, you're a remarkable man, Jim.
Yeah,
thank you, Dave.
It's been great having you on the show, and we'd definitely love to get you back in the future to come back on and continue the chat.
Well, let me say to our listeners also, I'm sorry everyone has been coughing and sneezing this evening. We were on a shoot this afternoon for Art at the People's Voice, and Britain being Britain and it not quite being spring yet, it decided to drop at least 30 degrees in the 5 microseconds.
Although
and there's another bug going around the city. Oh my God, how many more can there be? So Paul and I have got back half dead.
With some of my magic tools, that you might not hear some of the coughing, so the audience might actually be thinking right now, what's he talking about? I haven't heard any coughing. So
I don't care. I don't care.
Now, Paul, we forgot to talk about chemtrails. I actually went through a chemtrail on my motorcycle and breathed that crap and got sick as a dog. And that's what made me realize that there's something more to it. And then I started researching it. So maybe when you have me back sometime, we can talk about that.
Sounds like it's done. That's a done deal.
There, because I'm actually writing a mini dramatization on chemtrails at the minute. So
you go. Excellent. Well, that sounds all good. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot again, Jim. It's
all right. Thank you.
Been a pleasure, and we'll speak soon.
Okay. God bless, guys.
God bless you, Jim.
Talk to you later.
God bless
all
you.
Right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, David, what do you think?
Well, isn't he a tour de force? I mean, he's intelligent, he's genial, he's got a huge heart and a huge sense of humour. I'm just thoroughly bowled over.
Yeah, no, definitely got to have him back. I'm not a Christian, and I've been on forums and I've railed with Christians before, and you have your differences and so on. But I just found him very genuine in what he thought. Yeah. And you can't argue with people like that. You can disagree with them, but you can't really. Or did that make sense? Me saying that? You know what I mean? Yeah. But anyway, he just seems he believes in what he's done, and he's just fascinating. He's got so much research. So for that alone as well, you've got to check him out.
Well,
I
you see,
hope our listeners have been impressed with that. Obviously,
I hope,
this
yeah.
is all for our
I
listeners.
don't have any Christian phobias. I mean, it
No.
might be a generation thing, you know. But Jim is a man of the light.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
It's clear. It's really clear.
And we get all sorts on here, and we'll have plenty more Christians and maybe even a couple Satanists to come on the show as well. So, but
Wait, do you know some?
sorry.
Why, do you know some?
That'd be telling.
I don't know any.
Future guests we've got coming on the show. We've got Freya Aswan coming on the show.
Oh, my mother in faith.
Yeah, a leader and author of Heathenry. We've got Cyrus McThurlash, who's will come to talk about Wicca. Fedor Toshkev will talk to us about nostalgia and personal memory. He's a fashion and art photographer, so that's quite an interesting one. And we've got plenty of guests we're speaking to, so they'll be unveiled over the coming weeks.
The mystery unfolds.
Yeah, and just again to our listeners, please spread the word about the podcast. Spread it around all your networking sites. And also, I wanted to say to you as well, if any of you are trying to download any of these shows and having problems or accessing the website, downloading for our RSS feed, please let us know, because we rely on you guys to get it all right. If you don't tell us, we don't know, we can't fix it. So any issues you have, it is a new podcast, so we have been finding our feet a little bit. Please let us know if you've got any problems, because we need to fix them and make it as good a show as possible for you. Likewise, if you've got recommendations for guests, we want to hear from you, so we can improve the show as much as possible. And I think that ties it up. David, you got anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, a wonderful week to everybody, and may the angels, whoever they are, bless you indeed.
Well, thanks for listening, and we shall be back soon. Thank you. Bye.